The question then became, well, how does this molecule, or how does this substance that we've called T cell growth factor, and at the point in time that we called it that, it was simply an activity that we measured, that we could measure by how fast the cells would proliferate. We didn't know actually what it was, but over the course of several years, we developed the methods to purify, to detect the T cell growth factor with a particular assay that we made, and then to purify the molecules that were causing the cells to grow. Once we had done that, the next thing we did was we developed an assay for the receptor using a monoclonal antibody that we could then use the flow cytometer to identify the receptor density on individual cells within a population of cells. And so that allowed us for the first time to start asking the question, well, how does this system work? What is going on here? And through a series of experiments that were done primarily by Doreen Cantrell in my laboratory in the early 1980s, really showed for the first time the molecular basis of cellular proliferation. Now, we just looked at T cells, but we could extrapolate back to absolutely every other kind of cell that had ever been studied, because it turns out from Doreen's experiments, what we found was that it depended on only three different variables, and those variables were clear-cut. The first was the concentration of the hormone, interleukin-2, T cell growth factor. The second was the density of the receptors on the cell surface, on a cell surface for that hormone. And the third was the time that these two molecules had to interact with one another. And you could adjust how rapidly the cells would proliferate based on increasing or decreasing the hormone concentration. We're looking at the density of the receptors. The same thing would happen. If you had a cell population that had very high density of receptors in some of the cells, they would start to proliferate way before the laggards in the population that had fewer receptors, even at a high concentration or a saturated concentration of the hormone. So it was sort of like the New York Marathon. When the gun goes off and everybody starts to run, and the whole population of runners sort of spreads out over time, and all the world champions take off and lead the pack. And those in the T cell world, these are the cells that have the highest density of receptors.